So welcome to this Travel Weekly webcast. I'm Ian Taylor from Travel Weekly and I'm joined by Mark Tanzer, Chief Executive of Abta. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
We'll start with the budget. You were obviously pleased with some aspects, furlough, business rates relief and so on, but you talked about the Chancellor's blind spot in relation to travel restrictions. So how do you see the budget overall?
Well, I think it is a mixed picture. I think there are certainly some of the things we've been calling for around furlough extension and VAT reduction and business rates relief. We were very pleased to see, very necessary for our members at this time, because in spite of the roadmap and vaccination good news, we are still in a very difficult situation. So those measures will help to some degree. But I was disappointed that the sort of broader travel industry, rather than purely the retail outlets, hasn't been recognised in terms of needing support. That's the part of the industry as well that has been really effectively closed by the government's health policies, which we understand. But the impact is, from their own data, that there's been a 90% reduction in business volumes, and those businesses need support. And I think maybe what the Treasury and the Chancellor haven't taken on board is this is all part of one big supply chain. There's no point in supporting travel agents if tour operators aren't there to be able to provide product and so forth, and it feeds all the way back up into the aviation sector. So we'll continue our call for tailored support for this sector, because of its size, its economic contribution and the jobs, that it is really necessary the Chancellor takes that on board.
But given you've been delivering that message to government consistently for months now, is it realistic to think there's a prospect of tailored support, of support being extended?
Well, I mean, we have to remain hopeful. I mean, I'm hopeful rather than confident at the moment that they will come round. I think the initiatives that have been announced around the new reconvened global travel task force, I think show the government do understand that international travel is a very important part of people's lives, but also a very important part of the economy. And I think the increased attention that they're giving to that is a sign that they do understand the importance of this sector. And, our job is to make them aware that companies are in very difficult financial positions, and we want the companies to come through these next few months to be able to be part of that recovery.
Okay, so to put the question the other way then, do you think the government believes that there'll be a sufficient restart of international travel, that they won't need to offer a sector-specific support?
You'd have to ask the government that. I mean, there are a lot of uncertainties about, even with the roadmap, about when international travel will get underway. There's a big difference between beginning of the summer season and end of the summer season, and the pandemic and various other factors can intervene, and that will make a very big difference as to how sustainable companies are. So I think they've probably got a watching eye on this. They know it's important. They know that from their own data that the industry's been very, very hard hit. They don't want to give out money unnecessarily, and I think they'll see how quickly we can get into our stride again.
Okay, we'll come to the roadmap in a second, but if we assume for a moment there won't be sector-specific support or an extension of business rates relief to businesses without retail outlets and so on, what are the implications for jobs, would you say, and for potential failures?
Well, I wouldn't want to predict, numbers of failures, but it's very clear from talking to our members that they have been going nearly a year now without any meaningful revenue coming in, and you can only go on so long. You've still got some refund obligations out there, people being rebooked and so forth, but eventually you need to get some cash coming in. At Abta, we've had about 23, 24 failures already, including, as you know, some very well-known and established brands. And we don't want any more, but they're under extreme pressure.
Okay, and it's almost incidental, really, but air passenger duty, again, the government's made no change to air passenger duty. It will just increase with in inflation and so on. Do you just accept that the industry has lost that battle and we'll have to accept air passenger duty?
I think it was a difficult battle for us to win before the current financial situation. It's an easy tax for the government because we do the collection of it. It's 3 billion or whatever straight into the Chancellor's pocket, and I can see that in where you've got huge government borrowing and you're trying to plug gaps, that air passenger duty is a very nice thing to have. Obviously, we've said that now more than ever, the industry needs to have that certainly not increased and ideally reduced in order to give customers the stimulus to start travelling again and to get the whole industry moving. Chancellor, he'd make his case, is trying to plug a very big hole in the government's finances. So we haven't won the debate as of yesterday's budget, but we haven't given up the cause either.
Okay. The roadmap was very much better, really, than anyone anticipated, wasn't it? Are you hopeful of a restart on May the 17th, or do you think that's a bit optimistic and it's more likely to be a bit later, maybe June?
I am optimistic. I'm hopeful. I think if you take what the roadmap is built on, which is the vaccine rollout and the evidence of what the vaccine rollout means, then that is very strong news. I think you have to say the government has done a really good job on getting the vaccine out, but A, having a vaccine in the first place, and B, getting it out to large numbers of people. And the evidence is now coming in quite strongly from the real world that it is cutting infection rates and taking pressure off hospitals. And those were the preconditions that were part of that May the 17th date. So I think if we can carry on that, then I think that could be still the sort of time when international travel reopens. It's not, the challenge for us as the industry is how do you convert the success of the vaccine rollout into meaningful change for the travel industry? And that's really where the reconvened Global Travel Task Force comes in. And, a number of different strands of work have to happen now, urgently, for us to be able to, as I say, convert large vaccination numbers into travel.
Okay, let's come to that in a second. But the Aviation Minister, Robert Courts, was fairly cautious when he appeared before the Transport Select Committee on Wednesday, saying that travel would start as soon as possible after May the 17th. And Jonathan Van Tam, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, was similarly cautious when he was asked at the government briefing on Monday, wasn't he? Refusing to be drawn on whether you could be confident in booking a holiday. So do you think they're just being necessarily cautious, or would you take from that maybe May the 17th might not be the start date?
Well, it clearly may not be if those various tests that they put up when they announced the roadmap aren't met. But I think that there are two reasons why the government would be cautious about that. One is they don't want to give undertakings or assurances that they then have to reverse out of, because that's also embarrassing. But also, I suspect they don't want people to change their behaviours at the moment. And if they say, yes, you'll all be fine to travel on May 17th, it will encourage a sort of wider change in social behaviours that could actually put those 4 tests at risk. So I think they will continue to be circumspect about particular dates and about reopening. But as I said, the bedrock under which that was based, which was lower infection rates, lower pressure on the NHS through hospitalisations, is still moving in the right direction. So there's nothing that has happened, I think, since the roadmap was announced that has currently jeopardised that date.
Okay. Looking at it from the other side, Travel Weekly reported today that some agents are saying they're being cautious in accepting bookings from May or June and really only comfortable to accept bookings later in the year. Do you think that's maybe being overcautious or sensible in the circumstances?
Well, it's for individual agents, to make that decision. It's hard to generalize. I think, we want the industry to get back on its feet quickly. Customers want to travel. I think if people are booking, protected travel arrangements, ATOL or Abta, packages, then there are protections in place in the event that there are cancellations or that you can't deliver the holiday in destination. So I think people should be prepared and willing to take customer bookings for the summer. It's really, I mean, the industry doesn't need me to say that we've got, the sooner, a week's difference makes a whole world of difference here. A week lost of the summer is a week to the bottom line, and we need to get going as quickly as possible.
Sure.
And in fact, a lot of members now are giving customers flexible booking conditions anyway, recognizing there is uncertainty, and the ability to move a holiday to later in the year if necessary is much easier than it has been previously.
Okay, let's talk about what you see coming out of the task force. But just quickly to clarify, Abta's part of the or consults with the task force, feeds into the task forse, and attends
we're very
the
much
meetings.
Yeah, no, but we were in the last task force. They've announced us. We are they're representing the members in this task force, and we fed into the work that went before the sort of scene setting meeting this week, and we're very much part of that endeavour going forward and representing all the members, including all the travel agent members.
Okay, but there's some frustration in parts of the industry that more industry businesses or organisations aren't actually on the task force or something, and that's not the way it works, is it? It's a government task force into which consults with the industry. Am I right?
Yeah, that is correct. And I think if people understand what the task force is there to do, it's quite a technical task force. It's not a general. How can we bring support to the industry? It has got some very clear terms of reference about getting travel moving again. Bringing together a system, I hope, for vaccine certification with more rapid testing, with what that means for quarantine and so forth. So I think having, the industry bodies who have got the particular expertise around the implementation of that is critical. But it's quite, as I said, it's a technical task force. It's got a real job of work to get those various elements coordinated, and that's what we're going to be working on between now and April the 12th.
Okay. The April the 12th day, again, attracted some frustration, and of course the recommendations will go initially to the Prime Minister, so we might not see them publicly to begin with. But it's also quite a tight deadline, isn't it, given that there's some serious issues to resolve. So it's the task force going to be able to meet that deadline?
Well, it's not starting from zero. I mean, the work has been going on with the departments around what a kind of phased change to testing could be and so forth. So there's some good work to build on. I think really it's a question of pulling these different elements together now and having a coherent system that works for the industry and works for customers. And I think it is a tight deadline, but we absolutely can, I think, and must achieve that if we're going to have a full summer, as full a summer season as possible.
Yeah, and it's going to be a phased removal of restrictions, isn't it? People can't expect everything to open up.
Well, we'll see what the task force says, but I'm not speaking for the task force, but certainly my view is that there are different elements to what has to happen for travel to restart. I think the government has moved a long way over the last month, actually, in accepting, I think, that some kind of evidencing of vaccination is going to be important, not just for travel, but I think within the UK. And, the Minister for Vaccine Rollout a month ago was saying, no, there wouldn't be any system, and now they clearly are. And Europe is moving in a similar direction. That's an important component. How does evidencing that, which work then with a more rapid and lateral flow testing and so forth, and then how does that impact on quarantine restrictions on different countries? All of those different elements need to come together to have as I say, a coherent system that allows people to travel. One of the things that the task force has said in its press release actually this week is that it's looking for a risk-based framework. And that's such an important factor. If you don't have any tolerance for any risk at all, you won't open travel. So I think the fact that the government task force has said there is going to be risk here, you're not going to stop every single person coming into the country with any sort of COVID infection. How much risk will you tolerate? How much pressure would that risk put on the health system here, and so forth, is what the task force needs to consider with the health authorities. So it's a lot of work, complicated work, but I think the intent and the energy is there to come up with a solution.
Okay, so with the vaccination certification, we can assume it would be travellers would need evidence of vaccination or a negative COVID test, and they would, because it wouldn't want to be discriminatory, I suppose. But there are quite a few challenges attached to that, aren't there? The World Health Organization at the moment is opposed to introducing vaccination certificates for travel. There would be the need to probably digitize the vaccinations that have already taken place. 20 million people have had them. There's no digital record of that for the individuals, and so on. There's a number of things to resolve. The EU's looking at this, but won't put a legislative proposal till later this month, and so on. So realistically, do you think it's possible to get vaccination certificates in place for a restart as soon as May the 17th?
Well, again, I don't want to jump the gun or of the work of the task force on this. I think, my understanding is there is a central database, because those who have been vaccinated are on that NHS database in order that they can get their second vaccination and the date of that and the correct record which vaccine it is. So I think the data are there. As I've said publicly, those data belong to the people who have been vaccinated. It's our personal data, and I think I don't see any reason why that can't be moved. I'm not a technologist to an app at a reasonably at speed. Something that can evidence the fact that you have had that vaccination. I think the political and the social concerns about it are understandable. People don't want to have a two-tier system of people who have, for whatever reason, not been vaccinated. But if it's not mandated and people will say, well, I'd like to be able to tell people that I've been vaccinated because that helps me and I don't have to have the same level of testing and I can travel more freely, then I think it's their right to do that. And I think talking to other countries, our destinations are certainly thinking in that direction, that the way they will facilitate British tourists coming in is through a combination of vaccine evidencing and testing, perhaps, but maybe lateral flow testing is acceptable if you've already reduced the risk through vaccination, etc. So it's part of the solution. I think it's not I don't think it's the only thing that will allow people to travel, because as you say, that would be discriminatory. But if it's part of the way of easing the travel restrictions, then we should basically push on with it.
Okay. Do you see a return of travel corridors?
I hope so. I mean, I hope ultimately we won't need them, because infection rates will have got to the point where you don't need them for COVID any more than you need them for other viral diseases, viral infections. But if we can establish that there are low risk corridors between us and other countries who have either got similarly high vaccination rates or low infection rates, and that the risk is reduced, and we can reduce the quarantine requirements, then yeah, I think that would be a good thing. Our view, Abta's view, and I think the wider industry view, is that quarantine is a big deterrent for people. Testing is a deterrent because of the cost of it and the risk might be found positive and have to change everything. But 10 days in quarantine coming back is a real deterrent after the end of any kind of leisure travel or business travel. So if we can move away from that, then we will get moving a lot more quickly.
Okay. The DFT statement after the initial task force meeting nonetheless did make clear that both testing and isolation were likely to be part of the initial recommendations for the lifting of restrictions, didn't they? So it seems reasonable to think that quarantine will remain for red list destinations, for example.
That's probably a reasonable assumption. I think that will, if we can get, in my mind, the sort of 4 steps are developing or having the will and developing some kind of evidencing of vaccination is important. I think there needs to be medical work going alongside that to show that the vaccine is effective against variants, but also that it stops transmission, or at least it reduces transmission, because for international travel, that's critical. So there's a separate stream of work that is going on. I think if that vaccination has reduced the risk, then what kind of lighter touch testing regime, if I can put it like that, is appropriate, that you feel you've got belt and braces, that you're managing the risk. And then when you've got those two, you look at the quarantining procedures. That's my own personal view of how this could work over the coming weeks and months. I don't think you can start from the quarantine end. I think you have to get the other elements in place in order to give the health authorities comfort to change the quarantine rules.
Yeah, the health authorities have said that they expect evidence of the efficacy of vaccines against transmissions certainly by the spring. So that would make a huge difference. The airline organisations, including Abta, proposed before the roadmap was announced a system of staged lifting of restrictions that would see 3 tiers, if you like, of destinations: retention of the red list destinations with quarantine in place, revived travel corridors where there'd be where the vaccination rates and rates of infection and so on were similar or lower than the UK, so without restrictions really on travel, and destinations in between those two requiring a mix of vaccination certificate or testing. Is broadly, is that what you would envisage to be the situation at the point where we restart traveling?
Well, as I said, that phase thing, I think, is a timeline. As we move through, increased vaccination and so forth. But I think those proposals made sense to me at the time. As I say, they show that a lot of pre-work has gone into the work of the Global Travel Task Force. We're not suddenly starting with a blank sheet of paper. Whether those proposals are quite right, we will see. And, we need to get the input from the Public Health England and the other health authorities as to their view of what that would do to the risk of infection within the UK. But it's a model that, shows that it's not suddenly going to be, complete change on a single day where we open all the borders and stop all the quarantine and we start traveling. It's going to be some kind of phased process.
Yeah. Okay. And are you concerned about coordination with the devolved administrations, or do you think when it comes to it, that will be sorted out?
I hope so. I mean, clearly the devolved administrations have control of their own health and quarantine policies. I think what we share is the interest in getting travel going again. I think it's travel is important to all parts of the United Kingdom, and I think if we've come up with a system that manages the risk and gets people moving, I don't see why the other administrations wouldn't be equally keen to join that.
Okay, and Foreign Office advice, is that going to be part of the considerations of the task force, or might we face a period when there's a Foreign Office advice is a little out of kilter, as was the case last year?
Well, I hope that, I think the Foreign Office, before we had this lockdown, were definitely moved away from sort of global advisories against travel to country specific, and what we'd like to see is sort of regionally specific Foreign Office advice, and to make sure that it isn't, this isn't part of our domestic health management strategy. This is part of the risk to individuals when they're traveling overseas. And I think there was a sense last year that perhaps those boundaries got blurred, and we were using Foreign Office advice as a way of limiting travel because we were worried about the effect of people in the United on people back here. So I think if we can get clear about the purpose of Foreign Office advice, and that is really focused on different countries and ideally different regions, then I don't see why that would stop the resumption of travel in a meaningful way.
Okay, and presumably cruise is going to form part of the task force. We had the recommendations on a phased restart from the earlier task force, but when do you see cruise restarting? Would you hope that could restart from May the 17th?
I wouldn't like to predict that, Ian. I think there's a specific set of concerns, obviously, that the government has around cruise, and I think we need to take a sort of longer look. I know that Clear and the cruise companies have done an enormous amount to make their ships sort of COVID safe, COVID proof even, and we need to feed all of that work into the thinking of the task force as to how quickly we can get going again on international cruising.
Okay, and in destinations, are you hopeful that the requirements of destinations will be broadly similar? I mean, we'd hope they'd be coordinated in the EU, for example, but that frequently hasn't been the case in the past year, has it?
No, well, I think the EU are working on a digital green passport, something which a proposal is coming in, I think, March 17th, which is going to enable travel within the EU for people who have had vaccinations. So I think that although they haven't been coordinated to date, I think they are starting to move to, I hope, a common system to allow travel within the EU. And if we can be part of that, then obviously that will help. I think, as I say, Abta's in very close dialogue with our destination partners as to what their strategies are going to be around getting British tourists in, what kind of controls they might look for, testing, vaccination evidencing, and so forth. But also very practical things. I mean, if we're going to have, if the UK is going to continue to want pre-departure tests for people coming back to the UK, there needs to be pre-departure testing capacity in the tourist destinations. I mean, it's not going to work if you have to travel 3 hours and spend a lot of money within 72 hours of coming home. So, making sure that we are in touch with the destinations, and that if that is still a requirement for this summer, that it's not another barrier to people traveling is really important at the moment.
Yeah, but presumably there will be quite substantial variations, though. So the EU is looking at coordinating the requirements, and Spain has said explicitly, yeah, great if the EU coordinates it, but if they don't, we'll have green corridors with the UK, for example. Portugal seems as though it could be stuck in a very different situation if it remains on the red list, doesn't it? We could assume that if there's green corridors, travel corridors, there won't be a requirement for pre-departure testing. So, for example, Spain and Portugal could be completely at opposing ends of the requirements, if you like.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I'm not talking specifically about Portugal and Spain, but I think different countries will have different risk profiles. They'll have different risk profiles for wanting people coming in, but they'll also have different risk profiles as far as we're happy to have people coming back. And I think we have to, as the industry, really live with that fact, certainly for this year, and be ready to help customers sort of thread their way through that. I don't think there will be a single solution that applies to all international travel.
Sure. Okay, and when do you see medium haul, long haul destinations coming back? So the UK government has said it will pursue international coordination through its chairmanship of the G7. The G7 will meet in June and so on. I know the airlines are looking at that, hoping that this could be the beginning of restarting travel with the US, for example, especially with the change of administration there. Are you hopeful of seeing some long haul travel this summer, or do you think that it's going to be too soon?
I am hopeful. I think we've obviously got our vaccination rollout going well here. It's moving at a very different pace in different parts of the world and in different countries. The new president of the US has made a very bold commitment towards getting all adults vaccinated. And I think if they push on with that and they see their own sort of mortality, infection, hospitalization rates dropping, then that obviously makes international travel easier. So I think we have to look at it almost on a country by country basis to decide when we can reopen. But all the incentives are there from both sides. I know from discussions with the US, as well as people here, that we want to get international travel going across the Atlantic. So I think that if the vaccination programs work over the next month or two, then I'm hopeful that by the summer we will be able to travel again.
Okay, there's clearly a lot of pent-up demand to travel. That's obvious, but we also hear people in the industry say there'll be a need to restore confidence amongst consumers in traveling. Presumably the two things can go together. Do you see that as an issue, restoring confidence? And for example, has the continuing bad publicity about refunds involving from which and so on, has that had an impact, would you say?
I think, well, it has on people who are not happy, that's for sure. I think, and I would say with refunds, a very large number of customers have understood the situation that travel companies are in, partly because it's part of their own lives. I mean, if you're in lockdown, you can understand how travel is not able to happen, and have been prepared to stick with their travel organisers to rebook, and in fact to rebook the rebooking, because A, they want to travel, and B, they want to support their travel companies. And I think in a way that demonstrates the confidence people have in travel organisers. You do expect me to say that, but I think it's true. I think when travel becomes more complex and more risky and more changeable, then you want people to help you do that. So I think for a very large number of customers, they are confident in travelling. They want obviously the health situation to change so that they're not at risk from a health point of view, but they understand and they're working with their travel companies. I think for a certain number of people, and I can understand, we're very angry not to get their refunds, and some are still waiting for refunds, and we need to be able, as the industry comes out of this, to show that the structures of financial protection are still very valuable and important and work, which they always have. They have delivered over the years. And even if people have not had their refunds as quickly as they would have liked, they will get a refund, which again shows the merits of package travel regulations and financial protection and so on. But we've got a job of work to do, I think, to make people confident that their money is safe when they book. Again, I think on the probably the more important side of am I confident to book is, well, what am I going to get when I get there? And I think we have to be absolutely clear with customers what kind of social distancing, what kind of other measures are going to be in place if they're in destination or on a cruise ship or in a ski resort, so that they don't go there and say, well, actually, this holiday is different to the one I thought I was going to get. And I do, in all of my discussions with the different destinations, say, look, the more information we have, the more clarity we have about exactly what's happening on the ground, whether it's travel restrictions, whether it needs to have tests, whatever it is, the better, because the customers want information. So I think this year and going into next year, again, a huge opportunity as well as challenge, been getting the customers back into thinking about, this is the holiday I want and this is the holiday I'm going to get.
Okay, but presumably Abta is going to be providing all that information, coordinating all that information for members. But at the moment, it's impossible to say with certainty what the restrictions will be anywhere, really, isn't it? The situation in the summer, we can be confident will be different from what it is now, but to what extent it'll be different, we don't know, in terms of social distancing or the requirement to wear masks and so on. So there's a limit to the reassurance companies can give customers at this point about what their holiday will be like if they book to travel in August, say.
Well, I mean, things can change a lot between now and August. I think all we can say is we will make sure that whatever current information is, we are able to pass on to customers. And I think we're not, we're not Nostradamus. We can't predict exactly what the situation is going to be in August. I think people, want to travel. The restrictions are, if we keep traveling in this direction, going to be relaxed, and it will be easier to move around and to have a more normal holiday. But we have to keep a very close eye on it so that we can understand exactly what the situation is.
Okay. On the question of refunds, refund credit notes, the issue of new refund credit notes is due to end at the end of March. Is Abta looking at extending that given the situation, and will the CAA do the same?
I think we're both reviewing the situation at the moment, Ian. I think, as you quite rightly say, at the moment the idea is that you can issue up to the end of March with a redemption by the end of September. We're looking at the roadmap, the sort of trading situation of different members, and we'll make a decision about whether or not that is extended. So it's under active review at the moment, and I think that's exactly the same for the CAA.
Okay, but you're going to have to make that decision before the task force has reported, before there's clarity really on the reopening. So an extension would seem necessary, wouldn't it?
Well, as I say, we're keeping it under very close review. We were encouraged, that the CAA have already extended, much at our sort of urging to the end of March, and we'll be looking at it very closely. So I don't want to predict how we're going to come out on that. It's not really tied so much to the activity of the task force. It's about how quickly we expect the market to really pick up through the summer.
Okay, and do you have a picture of the kind of proportion of refunds that are being met with cash refunds or refund credit notes or rolling over bookings?
No, I don't. I mean, it's hugely varied, Ian. I think a lot of people have had cash refunds by now. A lot of people have agreed to rebook. They may have rebooked for the spring, and now they see that if we're not traveling till May, they may be rebooking. As I say, they're rebooking. So it's very hard to generalize. This is the amount of money that is there. This amount that's being paid back. I think a huge amount of, I know because we paid a huge amount of claims of refunds have now been paid back to customers. So we're still working through the tens of thousands of claims we've got. So not everybody has had it yet, but I'm hopeful that we're gradually working our way through that.
So what are the claims that Abta's processing?
Well, we've had failure claims and refund claims where companies have failed as well. So it's not just refund credit notes. I mean, there's a sort of broader claims refund picture.
Okay. We've also got the ATOL renewals going on at the moment, and up to bonding process. That must be extraordinarily difficult, both for Abta, the CAA, but also for the businesses who have trying to renew because of the continuing levels of uncertainty. So making financial forecasts, also providing meeting the necessary financial requirements, giving the bonding market, the insurance market, and so on. So how difficult are those processes proving?
Well, it is difficult. I mean, people are, they're coming through that. I mean, with the September renewals, we have two semi-annual dates when you can renew your Abta bonds. Were difficult. There was no sign of when exactly the market was going to pick up at that point, and I think financial providers, whether they're shareholders or lenders, were rightly saying, well, where is the end to this? I think what's different with the March renewals is that there is now, the good news about the vaccine and the roadmap and the task force. So that gives, I think, more comfort to, the financial providers that they will, see the businesses through this period. We are very aware, as I'm sure the CAA are, that the normal financial criteria where you've had a year of not trading aren't going to work. So we recognise that. Our focus is on protecting customers' money. I mean, that's really what our bonding program is there to do, to maintain customer confidence and also to comply with the law, the package travel regulations. And so we have a very close dialogue with all of our members around how that customer, how much money is at risk, what kind of build up, what likely progression of that is going to be over the coming months. And all of that goes into our bonding discussions. But as I said a second ago, I think the landscape is more positive now in terms of having a summer season, people starting to get bookings now for that summer season, cash starting to come in, and people happy to rebook because they can see they're going to get a holiday.
Okay, so the landscape is a little easier, but at the same time, the refund credit notes will have piled up. So the bonding requirements have to reflect that, don't they? So people's bonds will increase, sometimes substantially. So on balance, businesses have got to find more money for bonding, but you're saying it's going to be easier to find that money. Are people going to be able to meet the requirements broadly?
Well, a lot of companies have paid back their refunds, and so not everyone is in the same position on this. So their bonding level may not have increased because their customer monies at risk haven't changed. If they have increased because people have got a built-up sort of refund credit note outstanding, then the bond will increase to reflect that. But as you just said, I think the cost of that or the availability of that is easier now perhaps than it was 6 months ago because of the change in the health landscape.
Okay, so your view is the process will be easier this month than 6 months ago?
I hope so, yeah.
Okay. We should draw to a close. Can I ask you, Mark, if you think the industry could improve its relations with the government? I mean, I know Abta works very closely with a lot of government departments, but you couldn't really say that the industry's spoken with one voice through this crisis. Could the relations and communications with the government be improved?
Well, yeah, people often say the industry doesn't speak with one voice. Well, that's because partly it's a sector. The interests and the priorities and the views of an airline may be quite different to those of a retail travel agent. So it's one sector, but it's not necessarily always going to have exactly the same views. My own view is that through this, the industry has been more coordinated than it ever has been in the time I've been in the industry. We have not only created the Safe Future Travel Coalition, which brings together 15 different associations, Abta obviously, but also business travel are in there. We've got cruise, we've got inbound, we've got a lot of different sort of destination associations as well, all speaking with one voice and signing the same documents, saying the same things to the media. And beyond that, we have worked very, very closely with Airlines UK, with the Airport Operators Association to present the view of the situation of the travel industry as a whole. So although people say, well, it's because we're fragmented and we're not talking with one voice, I think we actually have presented a very unified picture to the government of the impact of COVID on the sector and the impact of their own health policies on the sector and the support that we need. You don't always get what you want from government. And sometimes I think, when we do get things, we sort of assume they would have happened anyway. So you take, this week's budget, the extension of furlough, the VAT reduction, the business rates. So you say, well, the industry didn't need to be lobbying on that. The government would have got there under its own steam. And I think, well, maybe, or maybe not. And, our job is to be in the government's face, constantly saying these things so that when they do make these decisions, they make them along the lines we want. So I'm slightly sort of sort of more bullish about how the industry has worked with government on this. I think at the operating level, and I can assure people, because I see this very closely, we have very good close working relations with the different departments, whether it's the Foreign Office with Department for Transport, Home Office, all of those around how you can minimize disruptions and manage crises if they occur. The difficult discussions are financial ones with the Treasury and with Number 10 in the Cabinet, because they have a lot of other people who are also saying they need support. So you're not going to win everything as an industry, but I think I'm very pleased at the way in which the industry has kind of pulled together on this, and I hope as we come out of COVID and we look at some of the other challenges, carbon reduction, over tourism, whatever comes next, that we can maintain those very close relationships.
Okay, so and obviously a lot of this work goes on behind the scenes, isn't visible. At the same time, we have like competing campaigns. So the future for Save Future Travel campaign, but there was also Save Our Summer, signed up to by a lot of operators, advocating a specific date for a restart and so on. Is that publicity and that media pressure helpful in dealing with the government, or does it muddy the waters?
It depends, Ian. I mean, we've used media strategies ourselves. We did a public campaign with Safe Future Travel when we launched that in April last year. It was very much around raising awareness of what travel needed. I think what is the risk is when you get other campaigns springing up is that they're not necessarily sensitive, to the public mood. That if you go and saying we've got to get the borders open as quickly as possible, and the public saying, well, hang on, wait a minute, we're quite glad to have the borders shut because we're still worried about infection rates, you can end up with the industry looking as though it puts its commercial interests ahead of its customers' health interests, and that's something we would never do. And I think similarly, if you push or predict for a particular date for reopening that is separated from the kind of health thinking, then that equally looks sort of rash and insensitive to these very delicate decisions. So I don't think there's anything in itself wrong about the sort of media campaign or about even enlisting public support behind lobbying MPs, but you have to be very careful about how you position that with the government and with the public. And of course, that's something that I would say that we've been doing for a long time, and I think we've got a lot of experience at that. And it's easy for people to sort of rush in and have good intentions, I think, but sometimes have a counter effect.
Okay. Finally, then, Mark, on balance, would you say you're optimistic now about the summer, or do you remain concerned about the outlook for the sector? Could do both, of course.
Both of those. I'm very hopeful that and optimistic that we will get a summer season. And going back to what I said at the beginning, which is that those the bedrock on which the roadmap was based, I think, is still, as of today, solid. The appetite is there. I think the work that is going on with the task force to actually put in place the mechanisms is indispensable, but is moving quickly. So I think we will have a summer season which everybody needs and wants so badly. Am I concerned? Yes, because of course we're a year into this. Companies haven't traded. A lot of them are in a delicate financial position, and we need everything to go in our favour in order to really come out of this as quickly as possible.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian.